So I'm going to go over the CAD CAM operations and setup for CAD Part 2. So we're just going to open up our part. So in this case, it's up here. And then it loads our SolidWorks model for us. So now what we're going to do is, assuming you've got your solid cam add-in loaded, which I showed how to do in video 1. What we're going to do now is we're going to go new and then milling. Then we're going to select our part, tick, same as the last video, and then we're going to go through setting up our coordinates and our stock. So I've already done this, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go straight to the tools as well as the operations. Alright, so as you can see, our part is loaded and our coordinate system is set up with Z being up and then XY being the planar coordinates through the part. Alright, so in terms of the stock, what I've defined it as is pretty much bang on. So I've set 0 as all my edge coordinates, and then I've given a 2mm on the Z axis just because the drawing doesn't really specify what are critical tolerances, internal and external, so I've just assumed that the edge tolerances can be relatively close and then the internals are the accurate ones. So I've just specified the Z axis to give extra material. Okay, so in terms of our tools, so I only have 2 tools, don't really need more. So the first one's the 10mm end mill, and this is basically just going to do all of our initial roughing cuts just to take off as much material as possible. And then the 8mm end mill is going to do pretty much the rest of the internal geometry operations, as well as the finishing cuts as well. Cool, so we're going to hit save on those. And then in terms of the operations, so we'll go like this. So our first operation is going to take off all of the material off the top, excluding or right up until the edge of the outside oval. And that's basically just going to get off as much material as possible. For the second operation, we're going to essentially surface that top, get this edge nice and level. So it's got, again, it's got a 0 floor offset using the 10mm. So lower level here is set as this, and then the upper level set at the +2. On the stock technology, we're going to use a contour, pretty high step down, pretty average overlap, just because it's a very basic operation. And then, yeah, so the floor offset's going to be 0, so we're going to be right down at the part level in this pass. And then for the final pass, it's basically a bunch of plunge cuts as well as the contouring operation. And that's going to, it's a pretty complicated pass, but it's going to hollow out all of the internals as well as get all of the geometries. And so it's a 3D milling operation. It's basically just selecting the inside of the face to machine out. The tool we're using is the 8mm. The reason we've chosen 8mm is because of the size of this gap here plus the size of the corner fillets in here basically allow us to go all the way up to an 8mm to take off as much material as possible as quickly as possible while still hitting those tolerances. So the lowest level we've selected is the bottom face here, and then the upper level is the 0, which is this face here, this top edge. Going to be contour, an overlap of 0.5. It doesn't really need to be much bigger because it is a small a relatively small part compared to the size of the end mill, and then a step down of 2 because we want to go fairly slowly because this is going to be essentially a roughing and a finishing in the same pass. We're just going to use a larger tool. We're going to go a little bit slower. And then lead in, we're going to use an arc lead in. So instead of just plunging into the material and cutting, we're going to essentially, we want to use the edge of the tool to cut in as we go. So we're not essentially trying to drill into the part with an end mill. Cool, so we're going to save and exit, and then we're going to calculate this part, and then it's going to give us our new toolpath for that. So once that's all done, what we'll do is we'll go to operations, G-code all, we're going to generate, okay, and then again it's going to spit out all of the G-code for us with the tool changes, the quick moves, etc. So for this component here, the clamping positions are going to be at the bottom and at the top, and that's going to be sort of reflected in the report. In terms of how high up the part they're going to be going, they'll be sort of 3/4 or 2/3 of the way up the part, just so they're not interfering with these tool paths here, and that the clamp's not getting affected by that.